All right, welcome to episode 1 of the Oz Heads podcast. 20 some odd years in the making, right? To get us to this point. Kind of crazy how life comes in circles, man. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
You know, doing all these podcasts, like, I know you've done a ton, and I started doing a bunch of them too. And I told you before, I'm amazed. They always ask about our working relationship and how you first got in the cigar business.
Interesting story, isn't it?
And yeah, it's pretty cool.
To be sitting here on the couch after thinking back to I guess it's 96, 28 years or something like that, 25 years or something.
Yeah, can I just unpack that for a second? So
absolutely.
you moved to Nashville from LA,
correct?
Right?
Correct.
And you stop me if I'm wrong. In LA, you were training there. You were a trainer,
correct?
Right?
Correct.
Or weren't you training? You were training at a super famous gym at the time because actually
I think it's still there if I'm not mistaken.
What was it?
It was Sports Club LA.
Yeah, so because I was living in LA,
yeah.
So I knew this was the place that Magic Johnson went.
Yep,
is that right?
That's correct.
Did you ever train him or do anything?
I actually did get a chance to hang out with Magic Johnson one day.
How was he?
Super nice guy, man. Super nice. I mean, my vivid memory of Magic Johnson was it was in the middle of the day. There wasn't that many people in the gym. And he was working out, and this little kid, he couldn't have been more than 10, was constantly just trailing him, and asking him questions. And he had so much patience. The kid follows him down to the locker room.
Yeah.
Magic takes a shower, does the whole thing. After he's played basketball and everything, they had a basketball court there, and he's still talking to the kid. He was just such a kind soul.
What year was this? So was he still playing?
Was he playing? I don't remember. Because my entree to that was I used to train Jerry West's wife, Karen West, and she was very nice. And then Magic was there. Kareem came through for a tour. It was those kind of people came through all the time.
Did you ever watch that thing on HBO, that the Lakers thing they did?
Showtime or something like that. It was called
I think it was on HBO Max, actually.
Probably didn't.
And it was, but they had Jerry West portrayed in there, and they had his wife in on some episodes. So you trained her?
I trained her, yeah.
That's cool.
Not Magic. Magic came in one day, and I was just kind of showing him around. And then he was playing basketball, basically a shoot around. But this kid just kept following him everywhere, and he had so much patience.
So then, so how did you end up moving to Nashville?
Just got burned out on LA. LA was eating me alive, basically. Had an opportunity to move to
Where
Nashville.
were you living, by the way, in LA?
In LA, dude, I lived all over. I lived.
At that time, you were were you in Venice or were you?
At that time, I was probably in West LA on Kelton.
Okay, yeah.
Right by UCLA's campus.
Yeah.
And then
I know it.
Moved to Melrose, right off of Melrose on Sweetser.
Okay.
I was a half block off of Melrose on Sweetser. And
I did the groundlings over there, so I know.
Yeah,
so
you know the area real well. Yeah, I remember right outside it was a terrible old apartment, but we overlooked the Chardonnay, which was owned by Ashton Kutcher at the time.
Oh, really?
Other people, yeah.
So were you there when you were going then to
Sports Club?
Yeah,
I believe so. This is so
Sports
long
Club
ago.
was where? Wasn't it in Century City?
It was on Wilshire Boulevard.
Was it Century or it was West LA? Yeah.
West LA. It was on Wilshire Boulevard. I guess you would call it Brentwood.
Okay, so then why Nashville for you at that time? That was not the time that people were moving typically to Nashville.
No,
right?
It was a sleepy kind of a place. Just we just had an opportunity to move here, and I was like, why not? It was either going to be here or I was thinking about Seattle. I was thinking, and then everybody from LA ruined Seattle too. So I just had an opportunity to come out here. Didn't really have a gig, and I remember. I fell in love with cigars and everything. And
while you were in LA, you fell in love with cigars?
No. When I got out to Nashville, right?
Wow.
This is a long story. This is a whole nother episode. But I'll fast track it and bring you into this whole thing because I remember writing letters to everybody in Cigar Aficionado magazine, right? And I got turned down by everybody.
But based on what? I like this company. I'm going to write them a letter.
So I just wanted to get my foot in the premium cigar world because I tried to get a job at Uptowns. Peter Gunn was the manager at the time.
Yeah.
No, we don't need. I couldn't get for a $7 an hour job. I couldn't get hired.
Oh wow! So it was Nashville oriented, right?
Yes. I was already in Nashville.
So you didn't care if it was retail or you didn't. I
just wanted to work in
what end of it.
Okay. I bought my first cigars at Uptowns. Fell in love with it. bought the magazine.
Like right away, your first cigar that you smoked, you liked
First cigar that I smoked was a Macanudo Hyde Park.
Okay, and you liked it, obviously.
It was the last Macanudo I ever smoked. So, yeah, it was. And then I kind of branched out from there, and I would buy Cigar Aficionado magazine.
Yeah.
I would read like what was rated 90, 89, and I would go in with my little list, and I would look for the cigars and try to buy, that kind of thing. So I started writing all these letters, and the last ad in the magazine was CAO International, 830 Kendall Drive, and I saw Nashville, and I'm like, fuck, this is meant to be, right? And I remember calling the 800, it was 1-800-BEST-CAO, right? Back when they had 800 numbers. And I remember saying, can I ask for the owner's name? And they told me Jon's name, rest in peace, and wrote him a letter, heard nothing, crickets for like 4 months. And then I guess behind the scenes, you saw the letter.
Yeah.
And had you not seen that letter, I guarantee you Jon would have never given me the time of day.
No, but what happened was that I was living in LA at the time. So do you remember what year this was?
96.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right. So I was in LA. I didn't move back until 99. So it was during Christmas. And I remember going over and hanging out with my dad. We were watching some football game. It was around Christmas, I want to say.
Yeah.
And my dad is like, what do you think of this letter? And then he read me a letter that you had sent. I thought maybe it was because we had an article in the Tennessean or something like this, the local paper.
I remember that article.
Right, and I thought maybe I think maybe you referenced that article in your letter.
Yeah.
You said, I saw this article in the Tennessean, I love cigars, and you wrote a pretty long but well-written letter. And my dad's like, what do you think? And I said, I go, well, I mean, usually in my limited experience at that time, if somebody really wants to work for you, then that's a good sign.
Right.
Then you're going to have someone that's passionate and dedicated.
Right.
And so I was like, well, why not give him a shot or give him a try? And, and then we needed I think a shipping manager at the time. So when did you come and interview?
So I remember
Who did you interview with?
With Jono.
It was just you and
Maybe it was
Jono?
Philip Thompson too. I remember.
Okay, we remember him.
But I remember the first interview. I walked in and I had one suit at the time, and now I have.
You were wearing a tie.
I was wearing a tie and a suit, and I went in there and I was probably overdressed for the occasion. But I had a nice little interview, and then
Didn't drop any F-bombs.
No, I did not. I didn't have any visible tattoos at the time either, and. I remember CAO.
And so how was it? Was Jono is always nice, right? So I'm sure Jono was very gracious
100%,
and nice.
100%. He was very nice.
Well, so tell me, you are from Los Angeles.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. It was small talk. But we parted ways, and then 2 weeks later he called me and said he wanted to interview me again. And I went in there, and he just said, well, I just don't need anything except for a shipping manager at this point. At that point, it was mostly meerschaum and humidors, and we're just starting to get into the cigar thing. And he says,
but this was at what location?
Osceola, 223 Osceola.
Okay. So 830 Kendall Drive was
his home address.
Was our home address.
That was in the ad, though. That was in the ad.
That was in the ad?
Yeah.
So this must have been just when we moved to
Yep. It was the ad was "Diamonds are a man's best friend."
Yeah,
too.
right.
I remember that.
I remember that.
But I was like, "Hey, this could be a shot." So that's what I said. Look, I said, "I'll do it. Just let me get my."
But you had no experience as a shipping manager. Just in your right, you'd never done anything like that before.
I told him I'd be the best shipping manager ever, and complete fallacy that was.
But then, the story was, how long did that last? By the way,
5 months. 5 months.
So I heard my dad say, I said, "How's it going with the new hire?" And he's like, "He is the worst shipping manager in the history of shipping managers."
My wife can tell you I'm the worst logistics person ever, and somehow I finagled my way into that.
But didn't he say well, what is it that you want to do?
Yeah. I just want to get my foot in the door. And what happened was, fortunately, behind the scenes, I saw an opportunity to promote the company.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what turned everything around for me.
Which at that time, though, it was. There was no Facebook.
No Facebook.
There was no social media.
No.
There was maybe chat room boards. Is that right?
They were just getting started. Fuente's Cigar Family thing was just kind of getting started. Yeah.
And maybe did JR have chat rooms too or something like that?
This is so far back that I think Steve Saka was writing Cigar Nexus, which was like a blog, one of the first legit blogs, right?
Yeah.
So this was at the infancy of everything.
But I remember one thing was that like if people had a negative experience, you would always be like, "Oh, I'll send you."
Used to flip it around for sure.
Yeah, turn it around, and people like that.
I kind of did that to myself. I remember fast forwarding to like '98, and we had just gotten the samples for what was the CAO anniversary, initially Anniversario Maduro. Then we had to change the name, remember, to Anniversario. And I was so strong on that blend. I'm like, this is going to blow everybody away, right? So I innocently enough went on the Fuente, of all places, the Fuente forum, and I created a name, CMAD, which was CAO Maduro. And I said, this will become known as the best Maduro, hands down, And I titled the thread Best Maduro. Within like 2 hours, I'm getting flamed by all these Fuente guys, like, who the are you? And da-da-da-da-da-da. And I literally, what I did was I said, okay, everybody that just sends me their name and address or whatever, I'm going to send you samples. Because back then there was no FDA, you could send samples. And you tell me. And I did. I literally was like, I probably sent out 60 or 70 packs of those samples. And, the rest is history. That cigar was phenomenal.
What's interesting is like behind the scenes. So I'm in LA, and we had I was visiting stores all up and down the West Coast, and at that time there weren't that many taxes on cigars in LA. So that was a hot market because all the movie stars and Schwarzenegger was having those dinners at Shotzi on Main and Santa Monica.
George Hamilton had
Hamilton
had
the Hamilton
Beverly Hills, yeah.
And but I remember our cigars were like kind of inconsistent, because that was during the cigar boom. Yeah. So, and at the time, actually, Plasencia was making our first cigars.
Yep.
Great guy. But I think everybody was caught like off guard by all of a sudden this surge in demand.
The demand was huge. Right, anybody that could put a band on a cigar could sell cigars.
Yeah, so like one box would be green, one box would be like chestnut brown. It's the same blend, and so I'm visiting these stores. They're all like, "Tim, I love you, and I love your family, but look at the consistency." I'm like, "Okay, this is an issue." But then we needed an ad too because we had no ad. Yeah. We just had this diamond, and then diamonds are a man's best friend too. Because of the diamonds women like. So, but then I met this guy who I was going to this lounge in Beverly Hills called Nazareth's.
I remember it.
Yeah, Nazareth Guluzian, and he's Armenian, we're part Armenian, and he had a beautiful brochure that was like a tobacco leaf with his N logo on it. And he said, "Oh yeah, the guy who did it just lives right down the street," and he was living in maybe he was living in Hancock Park or something. And his name was David Ravandi.
That's okay.
And Ravandi did our first ad. Long story short, that was with women in them.
I remember those.
Right, and so I remember everybody hated them except for maybe Jono and I. Maybe
I
you
remember those. Yeah.
Because the whole thing was get people's attention when they're turning the magazine, and then all of a sudden you see this woman who's bent, she's almost naked with a cigar and
and they were tinted, one was blue, one was red, yeah.
So then Ravandi says to me, "Hey, help me get some more business in the cigar industry," and I was friends at the time with Tony Borhani, who had the Bahia cigars, were hot at the time.
Great cigars.
And so I hooked him up with Tony. And then Ravandi went with Tony to Costa Rica, where those were being made, and they were being made by Douglas Peringer, who, looked like he was from ZZ Top because he had the long beard and he had the
Don
hat.
Douglas.
Don Douglas, yeah. His real name was Douglas Peringer, but everybody thought his first name was Don. But then I guess he had all these Maduros that were sitting there aging, and he wanted to expand his business. Mm-hmm. So Ravandi said to me, he goes, he has all these Maduros that are sitting there, and he said, "You know somebody that would want them?" I said, "Yes, my friend Murat." My real name is Murat. But then, apparently he showed up in Nashville with a suitcase full of them.
Dude, I remember because Douglas Peringer came to Nashville, but he didn't even stay in Nashville. He just came to the airport and dropped off a suitcase.
Really? He didn't even come in?
Nope. And Philip Thompson was the guy that actually met him at BNA. And I guess you at that time you go up to the gate, took the suitcase like it was a drug deal or whatever, brought the suitcase back into the office, and we all started smoking. I'm like, this is phenomenal.
Yeah, so that was kind of that's so funny about how stuff happens.
Random stuff. And then we needed a band. and nobody
We
else
didn't have that much time.
No, we didn't have
right?
a lot of
Because we
time.
had the trade show like coming up.
So we all just jumped in, and I said, well, I love Partagas Serie D number 4, so let's make it look like a Partagas Serie D number 4.
Yeah. And then we asked him, what's the easiest box for you to make?
Yep. And it was a cabinet.
Right. And there was
thing.
simple style box.
You know what a lot of people don't remember, though, and I remember this clearly, is we only had 9 months of production on that cigar from that factory. It was only 9 months. And that cigar caught fire in those 9 months.
Yeah.
And then we came in to the office. You weren't in there. We got a faxed letter from Perringer saying, I can no longer make cigars for you guys, like on a Monday morning.
No,
John was like, here, read this. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. No, I remember because at the time, we had he faxed me the letter.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's like, what are we to do? And I mean, we're all like, at the time, I was traveling a bunch, so I'd made friends with all these other manufacturers and stuff like that, and then we had to get that shifted.
Yeah, it was funny. That was an interesting time. But
Yeah,
I still say if that cigar didn't come into the fruition, I don't know if I know I wouldn't be sitting here probably. I mean, that was the turning point for CAO that just...
It's true.
Right? Because then after that was the Cameroon anniversaire and
well, that also, got like, which kind of dovetails to what we're like, primarily want to talk about. We said it got like really kind of high ratings out of the gate for us.
It did.
In Cigar Insider, which, what was it? It might have gotten like 90, 98.
At that time, that was
88,
like, that was unheard of, right? It was
maybe
probably
did
90. I think 90 was the highest.
Oh, yeah, was 90 the highest? Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't anything like the Bosphorus vertical.
Yeah, Bosphorus vertical is amazing. 293s.
Amazing.
And,
I posted something on social, said 368 points, 4 sizes, do the math. I mean, because it was crazy. It's like 93. If you get one, back in the day, if you got 193, it was like
unheard of.
Unheard of. And to get 2 93s and a 92 and a 90,
you
couldn't have asked for a stronger.
Do you think the ratings still like with that? How is that kind of? I'm getting back into it after being a dozen years away from it.
It has changed over the last decade somewhat, but I will say, and this is an interesting topic because it's kind of award season in our industry. Some have already been handed out, some what have you. But honestly, like the list that everybody tries to get on, right, is Cigar Aficionado's top 25 because it casts a wide net. It's got a lot of reach, and if you get number 1, that changes the whole course of your profession. It's insane. I mean, look at Ernie, got 2 number 1s,
right,
so on and so forth.
I mean, is it fair to say though? Like I noticed some people say, "Oh well, why give it number 1 cigar of the year?" Which this year was for a Cuban cigar,
right?
Why give it to cigars that technically are not readily available in the U.S.?
I get the reason why CA does it because it's a global magazine.
Right.
So the magazine is read in the UK and Europe, what have you, and so there you can legally smoke Cuban cigars. So it has to be in the mix. But to me, there's also an element of like, okay, you're in the magazine business, so you've got to take care of the people that pay your bills. Cubans don't take out ads, so they're not really paying your bills as a magazine publication. But I get the concept. It's a very interesting topic because I don't want to say it's predictable, but there are going to be certain brands that are in there year in, year out. And, those brands are typical advertisers of the magazine, right? But, my thing with CA has always been like, it's a subjective list. This is what they're saying are the best 25 cigars that they smoked this year. And it's a guide. It's their, and then you have Half Wheel has a top 25 list, and they're saying these are the best 25 cigars. But both, what they do have in commonality is that they both have a echelon where they cut it off. Like they'll say, like every cigar that we rated that's 91 or above is eligible. Then they pull those cigars, then they smoke them again, and they cut it down, and then eventually there's your list. Right?
Okay, so for like a top 25 list, what are the qualifications to be judged for a top 25?
I believe for CA, I think the cutoff is 91 in either Insider or
Aficionado. Yeah.
And Half Wheel, the cutoff is 91 also. I just watched, Half Wheel just did their top 25 last Friday. They did it live. And I know that they said that there was 198 cigars that they reviewed during the course of the year. 28 made the cut in terms of 91 or above, and then 25 made the list. and then they re-smoked them, and then they, here's our list of top 25.
So when you say they,
Brooks Whittington, Charlie Minato, Brian Burt, Patrick Legreed. That's their editorial staff. So
4 people.
4 people.
And then I think with Aficionado, isn't it similar? I haven't been brushed up on that.
I don't know. They cut me off of the comp list, so I haven't seen the magazine in years.
I thought it was kind of a similar type deal.
I think it is. Right? Well, I know it's like Dave, Matola. There might be 1 or 2 other guys in the mix in there too.
That are on the tasting panel, but they try to be, I think, pretty kind of blind about the whole thing.
Yeah. I think so. Right? I believe that they are smoked blind, to be honest. Everybody has different palates and everything, So
yeah, I mean that's the problem is that it's very subjective. I mean, so.
It is.
But I mean, you and I have smoked aggregate. It's sort of like I feel like 10,000 hours. We've already passed our 10,000 hours.
Yes, no doubt.
You and I for sure.
And 10,000 cigars, I'm sure.
Yeah.
No
so
doubt.
it's you kind of become skewed as to you're probably honestly gonna become skewed more towards fuller bodied cigars, I would think. You think?
For me, I've kind of come full circle. Like I started off, like I said, that Macanudo Hyde Park, right? And then it's just to me, it's like wine. Like you start off with like a white wine, like a Sauvignon Blanc or something, and you start going into Pinots, and then you start building. The next thing you know, you're doing these big, bold Bordeauxs, right? I've kind of gone that route, and then I kind of go, God, everything Crown Heads is making is dark and heavy, and so I'm kind of more on the other side of the fence nowadays currently, where I enjoy cigars that are more subtle, nuanced, complex, that don't hit you over the head.
One thing that I find that and I like it that I noticed particularly Half Wheel talks about is the retrohale effect, which was something that I was taught. I forgot who taught me, but it adds another kind of element. When you're able to blow the smoke out of your nose,
100%.
You can feel kind of it's almost like going into a panorama or going from black and white to color. Some people say.
Oh yeah. It takes
so I
a
think
different.
That's good. Yeah.
Ernie taught me, Ernesto Perez-Carrillo taught me a little trick when we were working on 4 Kicks back in 2011. It wasn't even smoking and retrohaling. He would take a hand of tobacco, he would light it, say it's a Viso or something, and then he'd wave it under your nose, and he'd be like, take a hit. And I'm like, what? No, breathe, take a hit. And I'm like, whoa. You know what I mean? It's like your eyes are tearing, and he goes, that's how you get the strength of the tobacco and how you can validate where the level is going to be, as opposed to just, puffing it and tasting it. You really get the feel for the tobacco.
Yeah. When I was with him recently, he with some tobacco that was just kind of raw, because I told him one thing that we did when I was at CAO. I think I'd calculated we had 41 different types of tobacco from 21 different regions, or no, 21 different countries. I think that's right. So Nicaragua will be using maybe 4 different regions at the time. Right. Whereas Cameroon may have been 1.
Right.
But I wanted them to make 100% of puros of just that, so that we could taste what is, Esteli Seco,
right,
for example, and then write notes on that, almost like spices.
Yeah, I saw that you guys did that whole thing, cabinet. All the little puritos. You came back with all of those,
So that you can kind of say, all right, we want to add some, olor secos. What does that kind of taste like? And it was a cool experimentation, because you could actually taste. I mean, the whole thought was, it's like nutmeg. I've been cooking a lot, right? So nutmeg, what does that taste like on its own? Or, actually a good one is cumin. So I don't particularly care for cumin taste. It can be overwhelming at times, but if you have a little bit of it when you're cooking something, it can really kind of open things up or take things into another kind of exotic flavor profile thing. So that's the whole idea, right? Is to understand what does, Esteli Ligero on its own taste like. Does it make your palate salivate, or does it dry it up? That kind of thing.
He went even one step further. When we were validating tobaccos for 4 Kicks, he would get hands of tobacco. Let's say it was Esteli Ligero, but this was in one farm and this was 10 miles away, and I'm like, they're both the same thing, right? and he would make me smoke the burritos of that and validate. And there were differences just in 10 miles away. It's really fascinating.
Well,
study.
that's the whole thing. Is that like I think wines have done a really good job of saying we have these different microclimates even within like say a region of Nicaragua. But with cigars, we're getting there. We haven't like really kind of gone to the level that wines are at right now with kind of discussing that, talking about that. I talked to them a lot about, the soil and what is in the soil. What is, because, they talk a lot about that in wines.
Even you could touch it. Like jalapa dirt is completely different than Esteli, right?
Right,
You've seen that.
Yeah.
It's completely different.
So yeah, it's an interesting nuance to be blending cigars and putting together these different kind of components for it.
Do you find it different working with Ernesto as opposed to back in the day working with, like, say, Nestor or the Olivas family? When we were doing stuff back then. Do you find the process similar? Or do you think it's different?
Well, it was one of those things that we're pretty open-minded. So when working with the Toraños or the Olivas family, where we had CAO predominantly made at the end, they would always send us kind of samples of little puritos of 100% Colombian tobacco, for example, so we could test that and see what that's like. But typically those would be placed in a blend almost like a cumin, right? You don't have that high a percentage of it, but you might have like 20% of it or a couple of leaves in the filler to see what that does. But to, Ernesto and his son's credit, I mean, I mentioned it to them, like saying it would be nice, on this last trip that we most recently went down to the Dominican to see what you guys are utilizing, what you guys have good inventories of, and you think is high quality, so that when we're having a discussion, it could be a more informed discussion. So, if Ernesto says, I think we should add some Piloto Cubano, Ligero, or Viso, that now I have like notes that I can refer back to saying, okay, this is what I thought it tasted like on its own. Right. One thing that was interesting to me about the whole thing with the ratings is that I remember having a discussion with some folks at Aficionado, and I noticed that they were saying, we always we try to test our palates on foods. And so there, some of their descriptions, like say hints of orange peel. I remember one, or anise, which in Tennessee that has a whole nother meaning, but that's that's just a cheap joke. But I mean, I would be like, what does that taste like? You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I started to also mimic them and like go and try different combinations of foods that might have been like at a whole different level, so that I could kind of train my palate to be more sensitized to that with cigars. But you do that, and at the same time, you go to stores, and I'll be like, what's selling in your store? And then the retailers would like, I would buy you. I didn't want them to give them to me. I would buy the cigars, of saying these are cigars that consumers are liking. Right. So I kind of, and this was at the time that our cigars were like inconsistent quality. You know what I mean? So I would be like, what would it take to sell in your store, like Larry Wagner or
Cigar Warehouse, right?
Yeah, Cigar Warehouse, or it might have been like Jimmy Hurwitz at Gus's Smoke Shop at that time, or people like that. And that was like trial by fire, basically.
It's the only way to learn, really.
I
found like all the taste descriptors with like CA. A lot of people poke fun at them. I've done the same thing in the past, but I mean, literally, there's like 5 senses I think that are on your palate: sweet, sour, bitter, umami, and I'm leaving one out. But all of those descriptors are just a more romantic way of describing those basic tastes.
What is umami?
It's like that neutral kind of mushroomy kind of, I guess, herbaceous. I don't know. I never really...
More like grassy, maybe?
Maybe like a Davidoff cigar. I don't know.
Well, we picked up some of that in some of the blends that he did too. Yeah. It was interesting.
It was fun. I remember my first experience working with Ernie, and he basically, because at the time we didn't know who was going to make Crown Head cigars. We had no idea, and we were like touring all these factories, and Mike and I were visiting with different places, and went to my father's cigars, went to a bunch of places. Longer story short, we decided Ernesto was the right move, but we didn't know if he'd make a cigar for us. So then we had to pitch the idea, because at that time he wasn't making contract brands. He was just doing EPC cigars, right? So, but he said, okay, I'll make it, but he goes, I'm not going to sell you the car off the lot. You're going to come down and you're going to build the car. And that was like exactly what I wanted to hear at the time. I was like, yeah, let's go, you know. And that was really cool because he took me from, you know, absolute nothing to just validating tobaccos and the nuances, and then getting the blends together and picking them. And he really put us through the ringer, you know, in terms of.
But I find that to be like a pretty underrated process.
Yeah.
You know, because I think it's like easy for people to assume that like what factory it's made from. Oh, this is going to have certain characteristics based on the products that are their kind of their products.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think that part of it, like at least my experience with CAO, was that like we, you know, we're always very involved in the blending of the product and what the product was, because, you know, we were kind of operating, you know, when you're down in Central America, you can operate out of that bubble. But when you're visiting stores and you're trying what consumers like in the U.S., that knowledge is important to implement down at the factory level, because they may not be doing that.
Right.
You know, that's why, like at CAO, you remember, like we'd have some cigars that might sell better than where they were made, their own staple product,
definitely.
and they'd be like, "Why is that happening?" I think it's because we had that knowledge that we were bringing in to kind of enhance that whole process.
100%.
No.
Absolutely.
So,
well, yeah, Bosphorus. I mean, to me, and this will be a good soundbite from a year from now, but I guarantee you that cigar will be on the top 25 list. I will bet anything that will make CAA's
well, the
list.
Las Calaveras. I mean, like every year when it comes to like blending a different cigar, because Las Calaveras always gets, you know, people love it and also gets a lot of
I don't think
accolades.
aficionados ever rated it.
But do you, with that, I mean, how does that process work where you determine year by year what it's going to be?
Basically, at this point now, we've been doing it since 2014, so this might be the 9th, 10th iteration of it. Initially, it was like, I thought it was going to be a one-and-done thing. And then it took off really big initially, and it just kept growing and growing to the point where like we had to dial it back a little bit. But I just wanted to do something unique every year, change the blend, change the sizes. It was always meant to be a limited edition
When
product.
do you start that kind of process in that
So
relationship?
for the 23, which will be out probably realistically May, June, I mean, we started that the fourth quarter of last year.
Is there any like, or how does it play into, because my understanding is that like Las Calaveras honors like some folks that have passed away that had some meaning
Correct.
to to crowned heads.
It always, like if you look at the band on the side, there's the gold coins, there's 2 and 2, and well, there's a set of initials in each of those 4 coins that belong to people that passed the year prior. The only time where we did it differently was the 2019 Las Calaveras. The whole thing was a tribute to Jono because he passed in 18.
Yeah.
And so
Very nice.
we did Jono's initials, and then we did just, I think we did little acronyms or abbreviations for Make It Happen and Talk Is Cheap. And so the whole thing was a tribute to Jono. He was the only one that got his own Las Calaveras thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Does that play into at all any thought process of the blend itself, or not necessarily?
no, that blend, I really thought that was one of our best, and I felt proud to put his tribute on that particular cigar. That was the year where I think we did like 140,000 cigars, and it was harder to sell it. It took longer. And I'm like, we're just inundating the market. We need to pull it back.
Why? Because it was more than usual?
It just kept growing. Because like the first year we did it, we only did 72,000 cigars. So it really was kind of a limitada. And then, Mike, we can sell more. Oh, we can sell more.
Yeah.
We can sell more. So we got to the point where we almost doubled it. And I'm like, that's too much. Let's pull it back. So in 2020, we went back to the original production schedule, which was like 72,000 cigars. And that sold out like in 3 hours.
Is there any kind of thought of like having a sampler that has one of each of every Las
what? People have
Calaveras
said that before, but how do you do that? You can't go back in time and 14.
That's true.
Those tobaccos are done.
Unless there were some that were set aside in the aging.
God, that would have been brilliant. Had I known, 9 years ago, it was going to take off.
Unless you kind of had the formulas and then you just recreated them based on if it's possible to do that or get as close as you can.
I think Jaime would probably kill me. I won't even ask him. It would be like, no soup for you. Go away. So yeah, no, it's a fun project. We've already finalized the blend, and now we're into the packaging element, which now that's become kind of like there's guys in Germany that have wagers and pools like what color it's going to be. You know what I mean? It's like,
how do you come up with the colors then?
Just whatever's I think looks good on the wrapper, or whatever that particular is. I mean, we've done everything. It's always changed. It's fun. It's fun to work on. But at 100,000 cigars, it's kind of hard to call it limited when that would be a pretty good brand for some people. You know what I mean, for the year. But the last 2 years have sold out like in hours. It's been crazy. So
you know that Jon painted a lot of sugar skulls.
Did he really?
Which is
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, because skulls were also like one of our top selling pipes. Mm-hmm. So he always had this thing with skulls anyway. I mean, people like them. I don't know, like what.
And speaking of paintings, pie synesthesia.
Yeah.
Are you willing to let the color out this year, or you want to keep that under wraps?
Well, I mean, no. If somebody looked and see what order Jon would paint the colors in, they would know that
they would know.
He would do red. So we have to work on what does red taste like and look like. So we had those discussions with Ernesto.
That was a really cool concept. I think the yellow took off like crazy at the show. That was really well done.
So now we'll see when you think of red, you think of red
Fuerte.
meat or spice or hot sauce or so that'll be interesting to see how that.
Ernie'd be a good guy for that for sure. That's right in his wheelhouse.
Yeah. So we spoke today about blends and how the blends are rated, and end of year and or beginning of the new one when all these when all of these evaluations come out. So
it's fun. I mean, if nothing else, it's nice that because like back in the day they didn't have all of these awards and da 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 da. It's just kind of a nice way to shine a light on the industry.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's good.
It's kind of cool.
It creates some nice excitement.
It does. It does. It generates a lot of buzz. Some of them are like the Oscars, some of them are the Golden Globes, and some of them are like the SAG Awards.
Yeah.
We tend to do well on the People's Choice Awards. Crown Heads hasn't necessarily got an Oscar in their future, but I'll take a People's Choice. That's cool.
I think what we'll do is if people want to hear us talk about different topics, then they can just comment on it. And,
absolutely.
We can go there. And
is this the part where we say comment, like, and subscribe and all that stuff? So let us know what you guys want to talk about on episode 2 of the OZ podcast.
That's right. That's right. Man.
Be good.
Take care.
All right. That's it. So we'll see you on the next one. Keep smoking Crown Heads and OFC. And we'll see you on the next one.